Black Etc. podcast, a podcast about how ideas and culture spread amongst Black Americans, especially outside mass media. I'm your host, Ian Youssef. I have a special guest today. I had the privilege of speaking with Miss J.E. Franklin, who's an award-winning playwright who came up during the Black arts movement in the 60s and 70s. She's the founder and artistic director of Blackgirl Ensemble Theater in Harlem. She's written many great plays. You may know her best for the work Blackgirl, which got her some notoriety. It was not only a stage play, but it was produced for television in Boston. It became a Hollywood film directed by Ossie Davis. Miss Franklin spoke to me about how she made it to New York after being from Houston, Texas, how she became a playwright, the connection between theater and education, and Black pedagogy. She talked about her history in Mississippi volunteering for Fannie Lou Hamer and Robert Moses, educating children in those communities who have been so deprived and so exploited. We discussed the buzz in New York at the time when she was there during what was later called the Black arts movement and all the wonderful artists that she worked with and knew, the differences between the art spaces in Manhattan. We also spoke about her most famous play, Blackgirl, the drawbacks of the various adaptations, and her reason not to pursue Hollywood and to stay with her theater and teaching job in New York. And finally, we talked about how to adapt and stay relevant in a modern world with COVID, technology limitations, and all that's going on today. So last week, I plugged a new print interview on the website with legendary boxing trainer Thel Torrance, who also happens to be my uncle. That interview is up. Please check it out. I also have a family connection to Miss Franklin. She's the sister of my wife's maternal grandmother. So my wife's mother's mother's sister. I think I got that right. And they refer to her as Aunt Jenny. And I guess I have to as well now. In any case, she was a fantastic guest. I couldn't believe how much I learned and how excited I was to just listen to her. I was so incredibly lucky to be able to speak to her, and I'm thrilled to share this discussion with everyone. Enjoy. I'm here today with award-winning author, playwright, activist, and educator, Miss J.E. Franklin. She's a founder and producing artistic director of Blackgirl Ensemble Theater, Inc. in Harlem, New York. Her plays include Blackgirl, Christ Child, The Prodigal Sister, and The Onlyest One Who Can't Go Nowhere, and Bless They Hearts, amongst others. Miss Franklin's taught at several institutions. I believe currently she's adjunct professor in the Department of Language and Literature at Touro College in New York City. Welcome, Miss Franklin. Thank you for joining me.
Well, you're welcome. It's a pleasure being on the show.
You are from Houston, Texas.
Yes.
How did you come to be a playwright, and how did you make New York your home?
Well, I came to New York because I had a job opportunity at a place called the Bluebird Inn in Riverhead, Long Island. That's near the Shinnecock Reservation. Mm-hmm. I worked there for about a year as a barmaid, believe it or not, and found my way to New York City, where I lived in Greenwich Village. And there I met my first playwright, and her name was Rosalind Drexler. And somehow I believe I just got called into the theater. I knew I wanted to be a short story writer. Mm-hmm. It was very difficult getting publishers to look at stories that were written by unknown writers. But I stayed in the Judson Community House and met Howard Moody and watched plays that were presented there, and just met other playwrights like Amiri Baraka. Mm. And, I met Amiri Baraka and Charles Gordon. Charles Gordon was the winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Mm-hmm. And after he won the Pulitzer, he was invited down to Texas. I think it was Bryan, Texas, at Texas A&M. And I said, well, if he can be a playwright, and because there weren't that many opportunities for Black plays to be done, but he gave me hope. And in 1968, when Dr. King was assassinated, that really opened the door for a lot of Black writers and artists, playwrights to come forward and get their work done.
Yeah.
And I submitted a play to the Harlem Writers Guild. And just happened to have been at the Guild the night that a representative from WGBH Boston came and said that they were looking for plays for a new series called On Being Black.
Mm-hmm.
I submitted my draft of Blackgirl, and it was purchased. And November of 1969, it was broadcast on national educational television in the On Being Black series. Someone from New Federal Theater saw it. In fact, it was Willa Mae King who saw the play and suggested to her husband, Woody King, that it be a stage play. And he purchased it and presented it at the Lucille Lortel Theater down in Greenwich Village. Played for over 800 performances and went on to win a Drama Desk Award. And that's how I got my start.
Yeah. We'll come back to Blackgirl later.
Uh-huh.
You're most known as a writer and playwright, but I believe you were trained as an educator. Is that right?
Well, most of the opportunities or the educational opportunities I've had in terms of teaching at universities and colleges have been in the field of education.
Mm-hmm.
Taught at Brown University, University of Iowa, but I was teaching writing. I was teaching playwriting and it just happened to incorporate that into education, my educational ideas to use theater as a teaching tool. So I wasn't able to separate the two genres.
Yeah, so that was my question. Like, why do you feel it's important to marry the two, or that the two are so intertwined, theater and education?
Well, I think they intertwine in the sense of students want to participate. They want a participatory form. Mm-hmm. And I think that theater is the most participatory form for students. Instead of sitting in the classroom and being receptive and being a passive learner, theater allows students to be an active learner.
Yeah.
Especially since the pandemic, I've gotten a lot of calls for plays because students were shut in for a year or two, and they just sort of dropped out emotionally and spiritually too. For a number of forms that were being standard forms, standard classroom forms just weren't working. Mm-hmm. So the calls I got were for plays, something participatory to re-engage students in the learning process. Mm-hmm. Apparently it works because I'm still getting calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Staying on education, I had a question about Black pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
Given the history of racism and miseducation in this country, did you explicitly set out to use techniques specific to the education of Black children?
Well, this is really the area that we're often steered into Black education. In fact, the job that I had when I was a lecturer at Lehman College, which is part of the City University in New York, I was asked to come into the education department because at that time Black students and Puerto Rican students were being shortchanged in the school system. Mm-hmm. And I was asked to design curriculum for students specific to those ethnicities. And the course was titled The African American in the Urban School Setting and the Puerto Rican American in the Urban School Setting. And so I focused on trying to find ways that would engage students of those ethnicities. They call non-white students. Mm-hmm. And I remembered I really introduced the idea that was really advanced by Socrates, who said, teach your children philosophy in the early years. Mm-hmm. And you have to do it in a form that they will understand it, that it will be really accessible to them. And so that's why I started working with Aesop's fables, because Aesop was a philosopher and he was an African. So I thought I could combine the idea of African ideas and African philosophy and present it in a hip-hop form. In fact, I have a curriculum called a hip-hop Aesop. And the fables are presented as 3-minute plays. Students perform them, and then they wrestle with the philosophy that's presented in each individual story.
Yeah. In the 60s, you volunteered in Black communities in Mississippi with civil rights activist and organizer Fannie Lou Hamer during voting registration campaigns. What did you learn from your experience teaching children there?
Well, during our training session, Bob Moses was one of the persons who introduced us to what we might encounter when we reached Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
He told us the children were slow. He said they're not dumb, but they're very slow. And he was absolutely on point. It was a little heartbreaking to see how slow the children were. Many of them were graduating from high school and were still reading the primer, The Fun with the Dick and the Jane, that first grade primer. We found that the children were taken out of school to pick the crops, cotton, and to pick the crops. And as long as they showed up and were marked present, then they could then get on the truck and be taken to the field and pick the crops. And they could not be marked absent, and they had to be passed on to the next grade. And so this happened all through their learning. And by the time they were ready to graduate, they were still basically on the same reading level, the same learning level. And when I went to work with Mrs. Hamer on the voter registration, I just discovered through listening to the children struggling to read that there was a greater need in the area of education. Mm-hmm. So I was able to work with the children individually. I wrote a play called The First Step to Freedom because, of course, I felt that the first step to freedom is the freedom to read, you know, the ability to read, the freedom to learn and to have that skill. Mm-hmm. And in listening to the children tell their stories, I was able to record the stories and using the words that they used. And the play was very short, but it was very powerful in the sense that once the children recognized the lines that they had contributed to the play, they were able to read through the memory, through their own memory of what they said and the stories they told. And getting this, the satisfaction of seeing children move from not knowing to knowing and not doing into doing, and getting on the stage and performing for their family, this was so rewarding for them.
Throughout your work, you focus on and center a lot of Black Southern voices and characters. Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's important to do that? And what is it about, I guess, the Black South that is so compelling?
Well, my formative years were spent in the South. I grew up in Houston, went to segregated schools, and was very keen in listening to the folk stories and the folklore and the rhythms and the sounds of the South. And so I call upon that voice because that's the voice that shaped me. It's the strongest voice that I have. Mm. It's important for artists to recall all of those, the images and the values and the stories and the voice, the early voice is always the strongest voice. No matter what you learn later on in life, you still have to spring from an organic base of where you came from and what your early experiences were. and they've done very well by me so far. All of my writing really refers to the values that I learned in my early years. I don't think anyone ever loses that. And sometimes trying to call on a voice that's outside the self that comes from another base weakens that voice.
Mm-hmm. When you got to New York, did you encounter any negative stereotypes from Black Northerners, kind of looking down on the South, or Black Southerners?
Well, if you still have that accent, you still have cultural mannerisms and they're the signs and that you don't really lose right away. It takes a while to wean yourself from some of those external habits, and yeah, you get that. But I think that people who come to America from other places have those stereotypes too, and that's how they respond to Black people. They can't look at me and tell where I come from, but they can look at me and they know the story of our enslavement. So we get that all the time, and it's not just from Black people who are born here in the North. It's people who come here from places all over the world, and they're always surprised that a Black person is educated and knows something and has skills and is competent and can do something. And I don't think that, we'll ever shed that response. I don't think that it would be a long, long time, way after I'm gone, before there will be a capacity to look at people and respond to them as human beings. Mm-hmm. That'll take a while.
When you began your career, there was a Black creative renaissance in some ways throughout the country, but especially in New York. What was Black New York like at the time? New York in general and Harlem specifically.
Well, as I said, I wasn't living in Harlem. I was living in the village, in the West Village. Mm-hmm. I didn't move to Harlem until 1974. So we're talking from 1963 to 1974. That's a long time. So I had the West Village experience. Mm-hmm. And then by the time I came to Harlem, what they call the New Harlem Renaissance was in full swing. There was the music, and whether it was music or whether it was literature or whether it was the theater, we really were able to get our talent started more in the West Village than in Harlem. Mm-hmm. Harlem was more music than theater. Theater caught on later.
Oh, okay.
You had the novelists and you had the poets. There was Nicky Giovanni, and by the time the whole theater thing caught on here in Harlem, it had already taken hold in the village and just moved up here. When Black people started saying, "Oh, we need that. That's down there. We need that up here," and that's when some of the churches started opening their doors to Black theater artists.
I have to ask you about my favorite poet, June Jordan, if you encountered her when you were there.
Mm-hmm. June was doing a lot of traveling. June was traveling in the northeastern areas of the, and we didn't see much of June in Harlem, but every now and then Nicky Giovanni would come to Harlem, but there was more money in some of the other areas. The poets went where they were invited. Jane Cortez was in the village, and she died before she could really make her way up here into Harlem. But Jane and Nikki were the big poets back then, and of course you had Amiri Baraka. Amiri was very big as a poet.
Yeah.
But the establishment, they didn't like his themes because they were very revolutionary. So his voice was limited to the village. But when he did come to Harlem, I know he tried to start a theater, space where he could do more of his work and where more black poets could come and do their work and express themselves. But I don't know if that ever got off the ground. Yeah, because, we were being watched in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. There's files on folks, Baraka and others, there's files on folks that the government was keeping tabs on.
Oh, you bet. Yes, they were. And, Amiri was, he was friends with the Panthers. And when I went to Washington to help with the breakfast program, I was involved with the Panthers too. And I know they were watching me, but going down to Mississippi really brought another dimension to my life when I realized that education was the important area to be in.
As you mentioned, there was a vibrant black theater scene in New York. You had the Negro Ensemble Company, New Federal Theater with the late, great Woody King Jr., who we just lost earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent did you all feel like you were part of like a special movement? And, did you all call it the Black Arts Movement, or was that label imposed on you all later after the fact?
Well, we didn't come up with that idea. It was called the Black Arts Movement because we were all black. We were all artists, and we were all involved in the movement. But that was something that it was just in the air. We were all a part of it.
Yeah.
Woody is the one who produced Blackgirl. Mm-hmm. And see, here again, all of those theaters were down in the village. They weren't up here in Harlem.
Right.
Harlem called it the Black Arts Movement because it was happening. It was going on, but it was not necessarily located up here in Harlem. The only theater that was trying to get on its feet was the New Lafayette Theater with, Bob Macbeth. But Woody's theater was down in the village, in the East Village at that. It wasn't even in the West Village. And the Negro Ensemble Company was also downtown. And as I said, New Lafayette Theater was the only one that was trying to establish itself here in Harlem. And then finally, Barbara Ann Tears started the National Black Theater. And all of these little theaters were struggling. And then they were just theaters in name only. But the National Black Theater was actual theater, and it had a theater space, real estate, and it's still here. And it was Roger Furman's new theater, and it doesn't have a physical space. It's just, these are theaters in name only. Now, you had mentioned that I founded Blackgirl Ensemble Theater. I have a physical space. It's in one of the floors in my brownstone. But the problem with trying to keep a physical space is that you have to have insurance, and the insurance is just prohibitive. So I do a lot of online stuff, but we do Zooms. The last Sunday in each month, we do script in hand readings with actors, really basically to keep the actors working, because when COVID hit, the theater space that we were in had to close down. Mm-hmm. Most of the theaters did. If the theater was not large enough to keep a seat between the patrons, you had to have an empty seat between the patrons. Mm-hmm. If your theater was not large enough to do that, you couldn't survive, because if you only had a 100-seat theater, basically you only have 50 that are operative. Right. And fewer than that. A lot of people just didn't even come out. They were just scared to even come out and breathe. Mm. So my grandson knew how to set up the Zoom links with the links and all the passwords and all that stuff. And since the beginning of the pandemic, we've been doing plays online, on Zoom. And, religiously, we're doing something the last Sunday in each month. Actually, but it's a 10-month season. And then the last 2 months, November and December, we repeat something that people missed, or they saw it and they'd like to see it again. But we're always there. We're always doing something so that people keep the continuity of the last Sunday in each month. Mm-hmm. And our themes are for the most part, political. This coming Sunday, we're doing, in fact, 2 days from now, we're doing a play about Queen Mother Moore. She was the activist who almost single-handedly petitioned the United Nations for reparations for African people who were enslaved. And recently, the UN tried to pass they presented a resolution to give us reparations. And, I've heard two readings. On first, I heard that everybody voted against except Argentina, America, and Israel. Mm-hmm. And then the other reading I heard was that all the European nations voted against it, even Germany, which gave reparations to the Jewish people, and America, which gave the reparations to the Japanese people. So we're still dealing with this issue of compensation and repair. And I think Queen Mother Moore really basically she gave the best statement of support in terms of, and the best justification as to why you have to repair the damage that you've done to people. It's not something that just happened 500 years ago. That damage is ongoing. Mm-hmm. And she fought basically all her life. I mean, from age 16 until the day she died, she was still fighting for reparations. To show how deep felt this thing is, President Malema is the one who presented this resolution to the United Nations, and they're listening to him. They didn't really listen that much to Queen Mother Moore, but they listened to him. He has power. And they just saw her as a fanatical black woman. But she was an important individual, and I hope people can, click in and go on Zoom and let her tell her story.
Back to your most famous work, Blackgirl. You mentioned that it was adapted for television in Boston, but it was ultimately also adapted into a film directed by Elsie Davis and starring several black luminaries. I guess my question is, were you wary about your work being adapted for film? And what were the differences between the actual play, like the medium of theater, and then the television and film adaptations?
Well, that's a good question. Now, when it was first produced by WGBH Boston, I had written it as a play, but it was translated for a video presentation for the National Educational Television. And so I had to do a lot of cutting. I think the original script ran about an hour and a half, about between an hour and 20 minutes and an hour and a half. Well, you have to cut that back for television to 57 minutes. And after I did the cuts, I lost the script that was cut. And over 20 years, I could not find it.
Oh, wow.
And then just by accident, I found the cuts. I restored the cuts, and the original play has been published in a book. But as I said, after it was played on WGBH, Woody King's wife, Mae King, saw it and asked him to produce it as a play. Now I have to go back to the original script and put all the cuts back so that it can work on the stage as a play. I'd never really done anything like that, so I was kind of feeling my way through the whole process. But it worked on the stage as a play, got very good reviews. As I said, it played for over 800 performances. It toured several major cities in the country, Baltimore, Maryland, Chicago, went to Detroit. It went all over the country. And as I said, it won a Drama Desk Award, and someone saw it. Someone from Hollywood came to New York and saw the play and asked me if I would adapt it as a screenplay. Well, just in terms of the human relations dynamics of doing all that translation from one form to the next, in the theater, the playwright always has the last word. But in film, the director has the last word. So I had a little difficulty adjusting to what you have to give up and what you have to compromise on and what you can get and what you can't get in film in a place called Hollywood that you can get all that in the theater.
Yeah.
In Hollywood, you have to let some things go. And it wasn't a good experience for me. Some people can handle Hollywood. I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, at the time, I was a full-time lecturer in the Department of Education at Lehman College, which is part of the City University in the Bronx, and I decided that I'm going to come on back to my day job in New York and leave Hollywood alone because they had all the plans for me to translate it from film to a television series, like a sitcom.
A sitcom?
Yeah, well, a sitcom with the same characters, and that would be, like Living Color or whatever these things are. And instead of staying in Hollywood and doing that, I decided to come back to New York.
Yeah.
And I just didn't feel that the work that I had envisioned in terms of this family and these women and the young girls who was played Pettit, who played the lead role, I didn't feel that story that I had written really for educational television and for the stage, and then translated into a screenplay should be milked for a sitcom.
Right.
I didn't want to take it to those places, to that place. I decided to just leave it alone and go on to some of my other works. And I knew I was not going to stay in Hollywood.
Right.
And I think I made the right decision.
What current projects are you working on?
I'm working on a project called the Race Aid Project. And what I'm trying to do is recover the original language of race. It's always taken me back to the 4th century, actually the beginning of Christian ethical thinking. After the times of the New Testament. I'm going back that far, and I'm finding characters who were having a dialogue about race, and who concluded that there are 2 races in the world, that there's a human race and then there's a divine race. One of them originates on earth and the other originates above the clouds in heaven. And so I've written 10 plays, actually, starting in the 4th century, because that's when it really sort of reared its head. From the 2nd century to the 4th century, so you got 200 years of dialogue that's coming out of the eastern part of the Roman Empire. And by the 8th century, Rome had declared itself the Holy Roman Empire. All this talk, you have 800 years of talk about the existence of a holy race. And then that starts marching forward, first through Europe, and then it hits into the other parts of the world. And this stuff that's happening in the Middle East, for example, I have a play about the 10th century when you have these crusades. You have people going into the Middle East on these crusades as a way of capturing and holding on to and possessing this holy land. And that's why all this language about holy land, holy island, holy people, holy empire, holy this, holy that, as a result of believing that there are 2 races in the world. And they can't always be seen with the naked eye. So I'm writing plays about that so that people can really get straight about what we got wrong about race and how we can get it right.
Now that's fascinating. Cannot wait to read that.
Okay.
All right. We get to the portion of questions now that I ask every guest. The first one, what songs got people on the dance floor when you were going out dancing at your peak?
Heat Wave got people on the dance floor in Heat Wave.
Yeah.
and I mean everybody, even the ones that couldn't dance, they get out. and many of them still can't dance,
Yes.
but they got up.
Yeah.
Because if you hear heat waves, you don't get up and move. You dead. You dead.
Yeah.
That's right. Stay off the floor. Because we don't want to trip over your dead body.
The second one. What is a Black cultural work that's an absolute classic, but is underappreciated? Now, this could be any genre, any medium. Books, plays, movies, songs, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or none of the above. You can be abstract with it.
A Black work that's an absolute classic.
Yeah, but it's underappreciated. Like more people should know about it or appreciate it.
That's a good one. Well, I would say Richard Wright's Black Boy. It really is classic, and I think it's underappreciated. Well, we didn't even get it in the Black schools down south. I got my hands on Black Boy, which was the first book that I had read from cover to cover, because a teacher of mine, an English teacher in the 10th grade, between 10th and 11th grade, trusted me to take the book home. There was only one library in Houston, and it was a white library, and it was on the other side of town. And this teacher, she got her hands on this book. She had a friend, a colleague who could pass for white. And she went into the library, she checked out the book, and then she brought it to, back to the colored school. And my teacher trusted me to take this book home and read it. And she said, make sure your hands are clean before you, pick it up and read it, because I don't want no jelly or peanut butter or, mustard or nothing on the pages. Read it, and I just, in fact, the title of my play, Blackgirl, really was influenced by Black Boy.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
About Richard Wright's Black Boy.
Yeah.
First of all, back then, in the Black community, you don't use the word Black to refer to. We didn't use the word Black. We used Negro or colored. So when I saw this title, Black Boy, I said, let me see who this is. And when I returned that book, I was never the same. My teacher could tell I was not the same student. And I feel that Black people need to read Richard Wright's Black Boy. And they probably have taken it out of the, as I said, it wasn't even in the school. This was something my teacher just decided she was going to get out of the library and let me read it. There's a lot more of a chance to have books that are on the forbidden list. Those books will be on that list in a Black school or colored school much more than you have the possibility of seeing it in white school.
Right.
Yeah. But I really feel we need to, and maybe this is what I need to do too, that every time Blackgirl is done, maybe I should mention the book that inspired me, and then that will reintroduce people to Richard Wright's Black Boy. I know I gave it to my grandson to read. Right. And so I know that's one hand that got it. But we're going to revive it. We'll recover the memory of what Richard Wright meant to us and why he had to leave America and go to Europe, and why he had to stay over in France and not come back here.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I got Black Boy in college.
Okay.
But I've noticed that Native Son has been the one that has been, that one endures in the public, in the popular mainstream. They've made multiple film adaptations of it, but Black Boy, not so much.
Well, that's unfortunate, and I don't why, but I'm just saying that, and of course I've read Native Son, but I really related to Black Boy, especially since he focuses on this growth process of the boy, and not so much on Native Son. I just felt that he poured more of himself, that I felt more of his pain in Black Boy than I did in Native Son or any of his others. And because young people are not reading the way they used to, they're always on their cell phone, and I feel that that's the book that hasn't been appreciated.
Nicely said. And then finally, what particular dish did your family make that you looked forward to the most?
Collard greens. We call them collard greens.
Mm-hmm.
Collard greens,
Yeah.
cornbread, black-eyed peas. And I would just pray that on New Year's Eve, when they would try to put that darn hog head down in there with the eyes and the teeth and everything, please get my greens and black-eyed peas out of the pot before you throw that damn head down in there, because I would not eat it.
Yeah.
If you put that darn thing down in the pot, count me out.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of times when all I could eat was the cornbread, and then sometimes they put that damn crackling stuff down in the bread.
Yeah.
This pork rinds,
yeah.
Fried pork rind. They put that shit in the, excuse my friend, put that in the cornbread, and then I couldn't eat that either.
Mm-hmm.
But primarily, if my mother would just take my black-eyed peas, take my greens, and separate mine, because I'm not a meat eater.
Mm-hmm.
If you just separate mine from the rest of you can put anything you want in there after that.
Well, Miss J.E. Franklin, thank you so much for joining me. I was honored to have you speak with me. I really enjoyed this discussion.
Thank you.
I hope we can read your work, and I hope to see you next time we're in Harlem.
Well, yes, be sure. I didn't even know you came to Harlem, but by all means, let me know when you come this way.
Well, thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
I want to give a special thanks to my guest, Ms. J.E. Franklin, for speaking with me. She is still active. Try to find her work if you can to support her. I took away several lessons from this discussion. A quick one is that you have to adapt to circumstances when you're doing cultural work, because things change, platforms change, circumstances change. In her case, she was talking about COVID and how that limited the scope of live theater, and how they created an opportunity to do monthly Zoom readings with actors to make sure that everyone is still involved and still participating. So community has to thrive and has to find a way, even when there are barriers and hindrances. We have to be mindful and have to actively try to create new opportunities to connect to people. A second lesson I thought about when Ms. Franklin said that opportunities for artists and creatives really increased sharply after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And that made me think of all of the media and entertainment opportunities that certain Black creatives got following 2020, the protests, following the police shootings, George Floyd, and all of that. So I didn't really make the connection that this wasn't a new thing, that this happened before. And to be quite honest, I was someone who was skeptical of all of that media attention and the interest in Black cultural work following 2020. To me, it seemed, in poor taste and tacky that people were treating the specter of Black death and violence visited on our most marginalized as some kind of upwardly mobile career fair. And so, just to be honest, I was not fond of a lot of that. But the point and the lesson I took away from it was that all of that could be taken away. You cannot rely on the broader mainstream media landscape as the major source of Black culture, because there is often backlash. That stuff will dry up because it wasn't about the principle. It was about making a quick buck. Oh, this is popular. This is hot right now. This is trendy. Let's hop on that. That is totally unsustainable. And so when opportunities do come, you can take them, but don't think that that's going to last, and don't think that the people who are giving you these opportunities actually care about the work you're doing or the communities you may want to talk to. And that was demonstrated in Ms. Franklin's example of Amiri Baraka, who is extremely popular in his day as a playwright and poet. And because his things were too pro-Black, too quote-unquote radical, he was kind of shunted aside from polite society in New York. And several episodes back, I actually spoke about this with Dr. Ball when we were talking about the myth of Black buying power, how Baraka was shut out of mainstream American TV news sources as well. So again, you can't rely on I would say outsiders, to platform you, to allow you to be able to speak to Black people. And a final lesson, I think, is a running theme from the podcast so far in a way that I didn't anticipate. So many people have been talking about integrity and principle and the concept of selling out, compromising your principles for money. And Miss Franklin talked about how she had some issues with the changes that were made to her play script for Blackgirl to be filmed in Hollywood, and how she really wanted no part of them trying to make Blackgirl into a sitcom. She thought it would betray the work. So 9 times out of 10, somebody seeing the glitz, seeing that the money and prestige and notoriety that would come with having a Hollywood TV show would jump at that opportunity. Miss Franklin decided otherwise. She said, my principles are such that I believe in the work, and they cannot be purchased by Hollywood or anyone else. So the lesson, it's simple. It's that there are principles and ideals that are higher than money. This is a concept that is becoming increasingly foreign in mainstream Black discourse. They are whittling down the idea of integrity, of principles in popular Black culture to be this venal sellout culture where as long as the money's high enough, it doesn't matter. You can do anything, even betray Black folks. Thank you again for listening. Please subscribe, like, rate, review on whatever platform you use to listen. Until next time.